Back to the Denver Radio Real Estate Show. I'm Cheryl Garlock with Colorado Front Range Properties. So glad you guys to tune into the show here today. Hey, if you have missed a show and you want to hear it again, or you want to tell somebody else to go find it and listen to it, you know we do want you to do that, of course. All you got to do is go to denverrealty.com. Go to denverrealty.com, and if you see the, or you will see the Denver Radio tab there, you can locate all of our guests there that are on our show there. And you can also go ahead and replay all of our broadcasts there. And we even have some YouTube videos from our show on our blog section at denverrealty.com. You'll find a whole lot of other things there to do, like, that little thing called searching for homes. That might be helpful since we are a residential real estate show. Now, I have John Clark with RMG in the studio with me today. And John is going to talk to us a little bit about engineering and homes. And, when I show homes, John, people don't always really think of the engineering aspects as they're walking through the home.
No, they usually aren't. They're looking at the colors and the layout and everything, and not till later sometimes they might notice things.
Yeah, they're placing their furniture.
Exactly.
They're looking at the size of the yard, that sort of thing there. But, I'm sort of anal in the way I do things as far as looking at things. I look at the bones of the structure as best I can as a layperson, not being the expert on it. But I've certainly been through enough homes to know what's kind of tilting, you might say, or sinking or sloping the wrong way. So let's talk a little bit about some of the most common soil problems that we might experience along the Front Range, because a lot of people don't realize till after the fact, like meaning after they bought something, that they might have a soil problem that affects the structural integrity of the house. So tell me a little bit about the common structural problems that we might face here.
Well, the most common problem we have here in Colorado is expansive soils. They're going to be highly expansive or moderately expansive, and if it's an older house, it probably wasn't maybe designed for the kind of soils that it's built on. Newer houses are probably built a little better, but it all depends on how well the house has been maintained and how well the drainage is. So there's things we look for as to whether a house is being affected by the soils, because what the expansive soils does is that when it gets wet, when the clays get wet, they expand like a sponge in your hand. If it gets wet, it kind of grows, and when it dries, it kind of shrinks. Well, that's what clay does. Mm-hmm. And if your foundation is sitting on that, it can cause the foundation to lift up, and then when it dries out, it can go back down and go back up, and that can cause cracking and floors out of level.
And it's really important for people to understand, too, because a lot of people just really don't. They think they see something like this, oh, wow, I've got a homeowner's insurance claim. No way. I'm sorry to say, but that's not the case here. So this is why you need to be really aware of the soils surrounding your house and the drainage, as you were talking about. Now, let's talk about mitigating or resolving issues with respect to that. How might these be typically mitigated, these soil conditions these expansive soils, against particularly, say, new construction and resale?
Yeah, first, in new construction, that there's two most common ways that the soil is handled. Is first, either they can over excavate the clay, remove the clay, and either put in non-expansive soil under the foundation, or they can treat the clay, get it wet and get it to expand already, then put it back in, compact it, then build on top of that. The second method is to put it on drilled piers. Mm-hmm. Where you extend these concrete piers down to the ground, maybe 25, 35 feet, and now you're sitting on material that shouldn't be heaving or shrinking. And though it's more stable, then the house is built on top of those piers.
Now that's quite a bit more expensive than...
It gets expensive, and plus sometimes that doesn't handle the floors, because if you have a basement, your slab may still be placed on that clay, and then your slab floor moves all over the place.
Oh.
And even though that's not a structural problem, you walk on it and it's up and down, and may move your interior partition walls up and down, and people feel like their house is falling down.
Doesn't exactly pass the marble test.
No, exactly. That's a good one.
Oh, that's what I like to say there. So let's talk a little bit about this LabTech Foundation system that's I think it's fairly new to the Front Range. Is that right?
Yeah, we just introduced it last year. They've been using it in Texas for about 5 years now, because they have the similar expansive clay problems they have down there. And they do a lot more slabs on grade foundation, so they've developed this other system of how to handle the floor along with the foundation, where you put the house on the same kind of drilled piers. They can either be concrete or helical piers, or different kind of appearing system that goes down deep into the ground. And then instead of placing a foundation walls on the piers and then putting some kind of floor inside, we pour one big structural slab over the whole footprint of the house over this grid of piers. Then after the slab cures, it's usually like a post-tension slab, we have these little mechanisms we place on top of the piers in the slab that we lift the slab up off the ground. So after about 3 days, we lift the slab up about 8 inches, get it off the ground. So you got a void underneath the whole house. Let the clay do what it wants to do. And
It's like a giant crawl space.
Exactly. Well, it's a little tiny crawl space, but we cover it up and just let the clay heave down in there if they want to. But you don't need a big 30-inch crawl space like they do now with wood floors.
You know, it's interesting because you mentioned Texas there, because I have a brother that lives in Texas in the Lubbock area, and he was having the heaving and movement problems, only the soil wasn't wet like we would have here as a potential problem. This was so dry.
Exactly.
I don't know what they call that dryness, but you know, those super dry areas where it's super cracked.
It shrinks just like a bottom of a lake bed. When
Yeah,
it
the
dries
bottom
out,
of a
you
lake
see all
bed
those
that is dry,
cracks,
and
same
so
thing.
he needed to add water in order to get his foundation to somewhat readjust itself.
It's the change in moisture that causes the problem. It's not getting it wet or getting it dry. It's both. If it's whatever it starts with, if it gets wetter, it expands. If it gets drier, then it shrinks. So either direction you don't want.
Now, has this kind of system been used somewhere then for expansive soils?
Yes, in Texas they use it quite a bit. They've used it. They've built about 700 homes on it and haven't had any problems. And basically, like I say, now you've got your whole structural floor system off the ground, and their whole house is built on top of that. So you have this little 8-inch, 10-inch gap under the whole house, other than the piers, and the piers are set on solid material.
So, and how long, it's been a proven design concept then obviously that this new LabTech technology does work.
Right.
And are we starting to do it in
Yes.
Colorado because it's now been in Texas?
We built 4 of them in Colorado already. We've had some infill lots where they couldn't really dig out the clay because they had houses next door too close to the side, so they had to couldn't dig out the clay, so we put in the piers and put the LabTech system on it. Another guy had he likes to build houses without basements, and he doesn't want any steps in the house. It's like an over 55 kind of house where people don't want to go up steps or go down steps and that sort of thing.
I know what that
like
feels
we're all
like.
getting too soon. And so he wanted on that grade floor, and he didn't want any movement in his floor like a slab in a basement might do. He didn't want any movement, no cracks, so we did this kind of system where we put it on piers and poured the slab, lifted the slab up off the ground, and now it's not going to move.
Wow. Well, you know, I don't have a whole lot of time left on this subject here, but I do want to ask, you know, how is the system, is it more cost effective than a conventional system? And do we do soil tests first to figure out which you need, which system will work?
Yeah, you always do soil tests before you build a house or even add on to a house. You should always know what the soils are about, and we can determine what kind of foundation to go on there from there.
Okay, great. Wow, you guys, we got a whole lot more to talk about on the Denver Radio Real Estate Show, so you want to stay tuned, get your pen and paper ready, because Lisa and I are going to be talking about some great properties that we're going to share with you, and we'll be right back with you in just a second or two.